Chag Sameach, everyone. Happy Pesach. A Zisen Pesach, a sweet Pesach. I know that we're all far away from one another. We're sitting at home, watching on our computers, on our laptops. It's an unusual time for this Passover season, but it's also a time when we draw together, bring our souls and our community together, and this is the best instrument that we can use in order for all of us to celebrate. I pray that next year we'll be able to sit together in this room, in this sanctuary, and celebrate Passover as we have for many years. So before we begin the Seder, and I hope that you'll be able to follow us with your Haggadahs at home, I want to thank our Cantor, Ephraim Herrera, for being with us tonight. Also, special thank you to Elisheva Herrera, who is going to lead us in all of the singing and the special tunes that we so enjoy for Pesach. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Cantor and Elisheva.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. So, just to remind all of us of the symbolic foods on the Seder plate, we have, of course, the Zeroah, the shank bone, which reminds us of the ancient sacrificial system of worship in the temple in Jerusalem. And if you read Exodus chapter 12, you'll remember how God commands us to take the lamb and ultimately sacrifice a lamb as a symbol of redemption, as a symbol of deliverance from the Egyptian panoply of gods and false gods. We also have this wonderful charosis made by Elisheva and Cantor Ephraim. the mortar that was used to create the bricks that were used to build Pitom and Ramses, the great cities of the Pharaoh. The maror, everyone remembers maror. The bitter herbs, when we think of the bitterness, we're a little bit tinged with sadness and bitterness tonight because we can't be together at the same table, but we will overcome that. The roasted egg is also emblematic of the sacrificial system because both sheep and goats and poultry and grain, flour and wine were brought to the temple in Jerusalem as offerings to the Almighty and given over to the Levites. And of course, we have the parsley, karpas, symbol of springtime. This is Chag HaAviv. This is the festival of springtime. And finally, Elijah's cup, symbol of the future messianic redemption. Of course, I almost forgot our matzahs, our matzot. In this beautiful matzah cover are the three matzot that symbolize the three groups in society in the ancient biblical world. All of us, the Israelites, the Levites, and the Kohanim. So, now we're ready to begin with Kadesh or Chatz, and I'm just going to turn with all of you to page 21 in the Haggadah. Now in the presence of loved ones and friends, before us the emblems of festive rejoicing, we gather for our sacred celebration with the household of Israel, our elders and our young ones, linking and bonding the past with the future, we hear once again the divine call to service, living our story that is told for all peoples, whose shining conclusion is yet to unfold. We gather to observe this Passover as it is written from the book of Exodus, you shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the generations as a practice for all times. So we begin with the Kadesh.
Kadesh urchatz, karpas yachatz, magid rachatza, motzi matzah, maror korech, shulchan orech, tzafun barech, halel nirtzah. Praise God for fruit of vine, and you may drink 1 cup of wine. In salt you dip dip some green, break the matzah in between, of 3 matzot on the tray, take 1 piece to hide away. Read how God set Israel free, rescued us from slavery.
So we come to the first blessing, the blessing over the festival lights. I want to remind you, since you may be sitting with children or grandchildren, it's a great good deed to teach your children on this day. It says in the book of Exodus, you shall tell your children on this day what God did for us as we came out of Egypt. So don't be afraid to pause on the computer and enter into a discussion, or maybe there are questions with everyone at your Passover table, because that's part of the Passover experience, to raise your hand and say, what does this mean? How does it impact us today, what we're going through at this very moment in our history? May the festival lights we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O God of freedom. So we're not actually going to light the lights here, because this is the morning, but I encourage you all to light your Pesach lights, and Cantor and Elisheva will chant the blessing.
Well, Elisheva will.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, להדליק נר של יום טוב.
Amen. Our story tells us in diverse ways, with different words, God gave promises of freedom to our people. With cups of wine, we recall each one of them as now the first promise, which comes from the book of Exodus chapter 6. I am the Lord, I am the Eternal, I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians. Ve'hotzeti means to literally take you out, to bring us to freedom. So we turn to our beloved Cantor, and we're on page 24. Cantor Ephraim is going to chant the festival Kiddush.
Okay. Sovrim Maranan Barabotai, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol העם, ורוממנו מכל לשון, וקידשנו במצוותיו. ותיתם לאדוני אלוהינו באהבה, מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון. את יום חג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו, מקרא קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ומודה קודשך בשמחה ובששון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל והזמנים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. לחיים טובים.
We praise you, O Lord, sovereign of the universe, who has kept us in life, sustained us, and brought us to this festival season. We're in the middle of page 25. And And we come now to the first special foods on the Seder plate, the karpas. Remember that springtime and this coming Shabbat, we read about love. We read about the Song of Songs, which is the great love poem of the Bible. And it reminds us of a midrash which tells us that when Jacob and his family came down into Egypt long ago, they were shivim nafesh, 70 souls. Suddenly, in the beginning of Exodus, first chapter, it says we were so numerous, there were so many Israelites in Egypt that the Pharaoh knew not Joseph, he knew not who we were. In other words, he was afraid of us. How did we go from 70 to tens and tens of thousands of souls? And the rabbis say because the Hebrew women would bring their husbands lunch whenever they had a respite from creating bricks and building walls and building cities. And as they served them lunch, there was a sense of amour, a sense of love and desire. And so suddenly our generations, our youngsters multiplied, and we became very, very numerous. Bottom of page 25. Arise, my beloved, my fair one, come away, for lo, the winter is past. Flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing is here. The song of the dove is heard in our land. Let us go down to the vineyards to see if the vines have budded. There will I give you my love. So if you'll take some of the parsley on your Seder plate and dip it into the salt water. I forgot to mention the salt water here, symbol of our tears, of our sadness, living through the Egyptian experience. And with a little parsley or lettuce, we dip it and say,
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'adamah.
Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of existence, who creates the fruit of the earth.
Amen.
We're in the middle of page 26. Let's think about matzot. Why are matzahs so important? As one of my teachers once said, that matzah, in a sense, is really the bread of affliction. After we eat it for 5 or 6 days, you know.
My mother would say the same thing, but different words.
So we're commanded to eat matzahs for 7 days. It's right there in the middle of chapter 12 of Exodus. And so, as the leader of this Seder, it is my duty to break the middle matzah and conceal one half as the afikomen. Afikomen, by the way, is a Greek word, not a Hebrew word. Later, we will share it, as in the days of old, the Passover offering itself was shared in Jerusalem. Among people everywhere, sharing of bread forms a bond of fellowship. For the sake of our redemption, we say together the ancient words which join us with our own people, with all who are in need, with the wrongly imprisoned and the beggars, the strangers in the street. For our redemption is bound up with the deliverance from bondage of people everywhere, and especially this week, as we think of so many homeless folks and so many people in dire straits because of our economic situation. We are bound up with them. Our assistance, our kindness and righteousness towards them will help all of us endure what we have to go through right now. So pretend that I'm hiding the afikomen. It's your task at home to break the middle matzah and put a piece of it away so that the youngsters in your family can look for it later on, even if those youngsters are all of 50 years old. Everybody has to look for the afikomen. So let's look at the Aramaic on the bottom of this page. This is a famous excerpt from the Mishnah, which begins to tell us about the Passover experience. Halach ma'anya di'achlu avatana ba'ara d'mitzrayim kol dichvin yete v'kol ditzrich yete v'yisach Hashata hacha l'shana haba ba'ara Yisrael. Hashata avdei l'shana haba l'nei chorim. This is the bread of affliction, the poor bread, which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in want share the hope of Passover. As we celebrate here, we join with our people everywhere. This year we celebrate here, next year in the land of Israel. Now we are all still bonds. Next year may we all be free.
Amen.
Amen. So our minhag, our custom at Tikvah, is to actually do the blessings for the motzi, matzah, and maror now. In many other households, you may do these blessings. You can put them to the end of the Seder service just before you sit down to eat the main course. But we're on page 28, and we now break the upper matzah, the uppermost matzah, and it's distributed to everyone. So I'm going to take this matzah, give a piece to Cantor Ephraim, and a piece to Elisheva. And we can say the blessings together with our Cantor.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al hachilat maror.
So don't forget, you need to take your matzah, put some maror, some horseradish on it, and enjoy it. Take a few bites. We'll take a pause for a moment in order to do that. I will go get it.
That's okay.
I think everyone has his or her own family traditions about maror. Some people like to make their own maror for the Seder. Some people use the horseradish root.
You want some, Ellie? Open up your sinuses.
If anyone has allergies, this is good. This is good medicine for the allergies.
I just want a little taste of that. Delicious.
Just to fulfill.
This is the bottom of page 28. Linking ourselves with our tradition, our ancestors, we remember the bond of observance written about in the Mishnah. We follow the practice of Rabbi Hillel from the time when the temple stood, which means in the early part of the 1st century of the Common Era. Hillel combined the matzah and maror and ate them together so that he might observe the precept handed down to him exactly as his father had taught him. They shall eat the paschal lamb with matzah and maror together. Let's read together. Together they shall be, on the top of page 29, the matzah of freedom, the maror of slavery. For in the time of freedom there is knowledge of servitude, and in the time of bondage the hope of redemption. So according to ancient custom, we would take another piece of matzah and enjoy the maror and the charosis together in between two pieces of matzah.
Hillel sandwich.
Otherwise known as the Hillel sandwich. Long preceded the Earl of Sandwich in England. So take a pause at your own tables and enjoy some of that wonderful charosis, and spread some of it on a piece of matzah, and then you can enjoy with a little bit of maror, you'll have your Hillel sandwich.
I'll let you fulfill the mitzvah. Seder?
Seder. So the motif of 4 questions, of 4 children, of 4 promises of redemption is one of the paramount, most essential ideas embedded in the Passover Seder. I'm going to ask Elisheva to chant the 4 questions for us, Manish Dana. And before we listen to her beautiful voice, think to yourselves and ask one another, what are the questions we really need to ask ourselves this night? It's actually only one question with 4 answers. And the traditional answers are all about food, except the 4th answer is to sit back, as you know, and recline, feel luxurious, feel like a Roman, feel like someone who's enjoying a magnificent banquet. But we need to ask ourselves some deeper questions tonight, especially in light of all that we are going through at this time. So we'll begin with the music.
שבכל הלילות אנוכי עומד ומצא, עומד ומצא. הלילה הזה כולו מצא. הלילה הזה כולו מצא. שבכל הלילות אנוכי שר ירקות, שר ירקות. הלילה הזה כולו מרור. הלילה הזה כולו מרור. שבכל הלילות אין אנו מגלים אפילו פעם אחת, אפילו פעם אחת. הלילה הזה 2 פעמים. הלילה הזה 2 פעמים. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בין יושבים ובין מסובים, בין יושבים ובין מסובים. הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים. הלילה הזה כולנו מסובים.
Thank you so much, Elisheva. And not only that, she's the youngest at our table right here.
Yes, she is.
I hope you all read the English together, bottom of page 29. Why is this night so special? The rabbis say, because we have to imagine ki'ilu, as if we had been slaves in Egypt and we were delivered, we were redeemed. What does that mean? What existentially does that mean? To find freedom, to be removed or to be liberated from all the shackles, all of the impediments of a truly free existence. For us in Santa Fe, for us in America, it's sometimes very easy to overlook our freedoms. But I think tonight we can ponder this and remember how precious, how special our freedom is. So on the next page, we come to the story of the 4 children. Before we read about the 4 children, I just want to mention a famous midrash, a famous story probably from the late 2nd century, early 3rd century about Passover. People always ask, why were we stuck in Egypt for 400 years? Why not 300 years? Why not 250? And why at this moment in history did God decide to redeem us? Weren't we deserving of freedom a few generations earlier? The rabbis skirt around this question and they give us 4 reasons why we deserved to be liberated at this time in the world. And they say, first of all, the Israelites who lived in Egypt didn't change their names. In other words, they didn't assume or take on the imprimatur of the face, so to speak, of an Egyptian. They also explain that we didn't give up on our language. We maintained our Hebrew language, even in the land of Egypt. The third reason they say we deserve freedom was we didn't reveal secrets. It's a rather equivocal statement. What does it mean to unravel or reveal secrets? It means we didn't spy on one another. We didn't go to the Egyptian overlords and say, Mr. Silverberg over here is not doing his job, or so-and-so is not fulfilling their quota of bricks. We protected one another. We held on to the integrity of our families. And the fourth reason they say we deserve freedom is that we acted with great sense of propriety and respect for the women of our families, for the wives of the Hebrew families. In other words, Egypt was known as the nadir of immorality. It was at the lowest rung of moral and sexual behavior. And the rabbis constantly refer to Egypt as a place of denigration, as a place where women were treated terribly, where sexual purity was not even imagined. But we, the Jewish people, had great regard for husband and wife. We protected our wives. We showed great respect for all women. And so we deserve this freedom at this time. Okay, here we go. Let's read together on top of page 30. 4 times the Torah bids us tell our children of the exodus from Egypt. 4 times the Torah repeats, you shall tell your child on that day. So there are different kinds of people, there are different kinds of children. To each we respond in a different manner, according to the question, to the answer. And here is the first question. The wise person, the wise child asks, what are the precepts, laws, and observances which Adonai, our God, commanded us? To that young child, or young boy or girl, we should explain the observances of the Passover thoroughly. The very last one of which is, after the Passover Seder, we don't turn to other kinds of entertainment.
It is the wise who want to know the service it is theirs to do.
The wicked person says, the wicked child, or maybe we could translate the selfish one. What is this observance to you? Since he says to you and not to us, in other words, he doesn't embrace the whole family, the whole community. He rejects essentials of our faith, the unity of God, the community of Israel. To him we should sharply respond, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I went forth from Egypt, for me that is, and not for you. For had you been there, you would not have known redemption.
The wicked one withdraws the self from anything beyond the self, and thus from the joy of redemption.
What we just read in English is kind of harsh. It's almost like saying, push that kid aside. Let her or him not be part of us. One of my wonderful teachers years ago said, it's our duty at Passover actually to draw in everyone who questions, even the atheist, even the one who doesn't believe in Judaism, even the one who says to you, I'm Jewish, but I don't want to go to the synagogue. We're supposed to draw in with love everyone around us. That's why we open up our doors and welcome the stranger. top of page 32. The simple person asks, what is this? To her we shall say, with a mighty arm God freed us from Egypt, from the house of bondage.
To the person of open simplicity, give a straightforward answer, for the Torah of God makes wise the simple.
And finally, for the person unable, the child who cannot even ask, you must begin yourself as it is written, quote, you shall tell your child on that day and say, this is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt.
With one who has no need to know, no will to serve, you must begin yourself to awaken the need to give the will.
So I hope that you'll have a chance at your own tables to think about the four children, the four different personalities, and how we answer all of them during this Passover season. So let's turn the page. I want to invite Elisheva to lead us as we enter into the Magid, the special narrative part of the Seder service, which reminds us that we began in degradation. In other words, we lived in slavery and we lifted ourselves up with God's help to the world of freedom. Elisheva is going to sing Avadim Hayinu.
And this is on page 104 in the Haggadah. You want to?
Yes, page 104 in the back of the Haggadah.
Avadim hayinu hayinu, ata bene horim bene horim. Avadim hayinu, ata bene horim. Avadim hayinu, ata bene horim bene horim.
Let's read together on the top of page 34. Our history moves from slavery towards freedom. Our narration begins with degradation and rises to dignity. Our service opens with a rule of evil and advances towards the kingdom of God. This is our theme. Let's read together. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. And not the Holy One, praised be God, delivered our people from Egypt, that we, our children, and our children's children would still be enslaved. Therefore, even if all of us were wise, all of us people of understanding, all of us learned in Torah, it would still be our obligation to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Moreover, whoever searches deeply into this meaning is considered praiseworthy, for redemption has not yet come to us. So even if you're sitting at home by yourself, we are obligated, you and I are obligated to talk about Passover and to read the Haggadah to ourselves. It's a great mitzvah to celebrate Passover, even if we're a little bit lonely and imprisoned in our own dining rooms.
Yes.
Elisheva is going to lead us in a fantastic melody for Pesach, Go Down Moses.
When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell, oh, Pharaoh,
So redemption is not yet complete. We come to this famous midrashic story about four of the great rabbis who lived probably in the early part of the 2nd century of the Common Era. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Elazar, the son of Azariah, Akiva, and Rabbi Targum. I should say 5 great rabbis. And why is this story embedded in the telling of the Passover? Because these were the great leaders of the Jewish community who were still living in Palestine. And in the year, somewhere in the 120 to about 135 of the Common Era, a war broke out pitting the Jewish arsenal, the Jewish army, which was really a guerrilla army, against the Romans. Akiva was the spiritual leader of this community, and he found a great military leader / friend named Bar Kokhba, who was his ally. And for a while, some believed that Bar Kokhba would be the messianic leader of the Jewish people and bring us back to freedom in Israel. It was not to be. But this story about the 5 famous rabbis is a way of reminding us that we have to continually discuss and delve into the message, the meaning of the Passover Seder. And so we read on the top of page 36, an instance of this story is told about Eliezer, Rabbi Joshua, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Targum. At their Seder in Bnei Brak, which was probably a little community outside of today what we call Tel Aviv, they discussed the going out from Egypt through the entire Passover night, meaning they were still discussing and arguing till 5 or 5:30 in the morning, until their students came and said to them, "Our teachers, the time has come now to recite the morning Shema." So as you see in the notes, it says that this Seder service happened during the time of the rebellion against the Romans, and Akiva was the leader. We knew physical servitude in Egypt, but before that, our souls were in bondage. And together we read, "For in the beginning, our ancestors were idolaters, but afterward God drew us nearer to his service, as it is written, of old your ancestors dwelled beyond the river Euphrates, and they served other gods." So we're in the heart of the telling of the story. And we're going to read a little bit from the bottom of 37. We have known physical bondage and spiritual servitude. We have also been subjected to social degradation. In the eyes of others, we were a subject people, Arameans, which means we came from the West. We were foreigners. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there, and there became a great and populous nation. So who is this father we're talking about here in the middle of the story, on the bottom of page 37? This is a famous couple of verses from Deuteronomy. It probably is referring to Papa Jacob, Yaakov, one of the patriarchs. Because remember, Jacob, after Joseph had become prime minister and saved the Jewish people from starvation and all of the blight and all of the things that were going on in Egypt, not to mention that he saved the Egyptians as well at that time, he went to the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh said, "Bring your father down into Egypt, and bring your whole family, bring your brothers into Egypt." And so they sojourned south and ultimately remained there, became a great nation. So we have many beautiful excerpts from poetry and from other writings on page 38, 39, 40, 41. I invite you at home to pause your computer and enjoy and read some of this material, whether it's from Rabbi Wise on page 38, who was the leader of the American Jewish community back in the 1920s and 30s. Rabbi Wise was an advisor to FDR, to President Roosevelt. Or read this famous poem from Edmund Flegg. "I am a Jew because born of Israel, and having lost her, I have felt her live again in me, more loving than myself." I'll let you read some of this, and think about it a little bit together, and we'll take a pause before I ask Elisheva to lead us in my Passover things. So you can hit the stop button on your computer, read a little bit, think about it, argue about it, and now we're going to turn all the way over to the middle of page 45, and I'm going to ask Elisheva to sing for us.
Maybe the rabbi has another copy of my Passover things.
Sorry?
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Great.
So you all will recognize the melody. I'm not sure you have the words in front of you, but just enjoy the song. It's very funny. Cleaning and cooking and so many dishes. Out with the chametz, no pasta, no dishes. Fish that's gefilte, horseradish that stings. These are a few of our Passover things. Matzah and karpas and chopped up charoset, shank bones and kiddush and Yiddish nerosis. Tante who fetches and uncle who sings. These are a few of our Passover things. Motzi and maror and trouble with pharaohs, famines and locusts and slaves with wheelbarrows, matzo balls floating and eggshells that cling. These are a few of our Passover things. When the plagues strike, when the lies bite, when we're feeling sad, we simply remember our Passover things, and then we don't feel so bad.
Thank you, Elisheva. So on the bottom of 44, the story continues with this wonderful poem, this translation of a poem by Chaim Nachman Bialik. Remember Bialik, who in the beginning of the 1900s was the greatest poet, Jewish poet of Europe and Russia.
Yes.
He was considered the poet laureate of the Jewish people. He had experienced and knew from firsthand experience of the Kishinev pogroms in 1904, 1905 in Eastern Europe. And it was part of his responsibility, part of his calling as a great poet to lift up the souls of the Jewish people who had been so decimated in Russia and Eastern Europe. Later on, he went to Paris after World War I and became renowned and glorified for his great writings, and among his many of his written works was the famous book called Sefer Agadah. He edited a 500-page manuscript which compiled all the great midrashic stories of the rabbis, and it became a bestseller. It was written in Hebrew and French, and then ultimately translated into many, many languages. It's still being used and studied today in rabbinical seminaries all over the world.
Rabbi, what years did he live?
He I think, was born in the approximately the 1870s and lived until the end of the 1920s.
Oh, wow.
He passed away before the Holocaust, before Nazi Germany.
Was he from France?
He was from Russia.
Russia, okay.
But he escaped the Bolsheviks after the war, after World War I, and realized that there was no future for Jews in Russia, and came to Paris. Continued his great literary career in Paris.
Yeah.
We are the mighty, the last generation of slaves, the first generation of free persons. Alone our hand in its strength tore from the pride of our shoulders the yoke of bondage. We lifted our heads to the heavens. Behold, their broadness was narrow in the pride of their eyes. Of our eyes. So we turned to the desert. We said to the wilderness, Mother, yea, on the tops of the crags and the thickness of clouds, with the eagles of heaven we drank from her fountains of freedom. So lift up your cup of wine. We're not going to drink any wine, but lift up the cup. We're getting close to the second cup of wine, I promise. Middle of page 45. We praise the God who keeps faith with the people of Israel. God's promise of redemption in ancient days sustains us now. For more than one enemy has risen against us to destroy us. In every generation, in every age, some rise up to plot our annihilation, but a divine power sustains and delivers us. Turn to page 40, bottom of page 48. We're going to celebrate and remember the Eser Makot, the 10 plagues. The plague that we're living with now, this virus, you and I would call it Dever, the 5th plague, which means some kind of blight or destruction, inner destruction of people. So on the bottom of 48, our rabbis talk, when the Egyptian armies were drowning in the sea, the heavenly host broke out in songs of jubilation. God silenced them and said, my creatures are perishing, and you sing praises. It's a famous commentary from Talmud and the Midrash. It's a way of saying, just because we were saved, we were free, doesn't mean we step on other people and glorify their death. Because as the text says, God created all of us. We have to have a little bit of compassion for everyone in this world, regardless whether they agree with us or not. Let's read together, top of page 49. Though we descend from those redeemed from brutal Egypt, and have ourselves rejoiced to see oppressors overcome, yet our triumph is diminished by the slaughter of the foe, as the wine within the cup of joy is lessened when we pour 10 drops for the plagues upon Egypt. So as you are prepared to remove 10 drops from your wine goblet, try not to spill it on a nice white tablecloth that you have there in your dining room. And we'll read together in the middle of page 49. Each drop of wine we pour is hope and prayer that people will cast out the plagues that threaten everyone, everywhere they are found, beginning in our own hearts. The making of war, the teaching of hate and violence, spoliation of the earth, perversion of justice and government, fomenting of vice and crime, neglect of human needs, oppression of nations and peoples, corruption of culture, subjugation of science, learning, and human discourse, the erosion of freedoms. Elo eser makot shehevim HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Mitzrayim b'Mitzrayim. Ve'elu hem, we pour out 10 drops upon Egypt. So the text, but if you're following with this, is on page 51. Here's your cup. This is the lecture's cup. Oh, that's right. Dam, blood, Sephardea, frost, Kinim, lice, Aro, wild beasts, Dever, light, Shirkim, boils, Barad, locusts, Barad, hail, Aved, locust, Hoshech, darkness, Makat Bechorot, the slain of the firstborn. And we come to our favorite, one of our favorite songs, Dayenu. Okay, Dayenu you'll find in the back of the Haggadahs on page 105, or if you're looking at the Hebrew, It's right here, in the middle of page 52. Page 52.
Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dayenu,
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 Dayenu, Dayenu,
To be traditional, you can sing 15 verses of Dayenu, which is the way it's written or edited in the Orthodox Haggadah, in the traditional Haggadah. We're in the middle of page 53. Let's give thanks and say thanksgiving to God for all the good things that we have received, which is why we say Dayenu. It would have been enough, but we received more and more and more. How plentiful are the reasons for our gratitude to God for the many favors which the Almighty has bestowed upon us. God brought us out of Egypt, divided the Reed Sea for us, permitted us to cross on dry land, sustained us for 40 years in the desert, fed us with manna, ordained the Sabbath, brought us to Mount Sinai, gave us the Torah, led us into the land of Israel, built for us the temple, sent us prophets of truth, made us a holy people to perfect the world under the kingdom of the Almighty in truth and righteousness. And now we come to some blessings that are very important. Pesach, Matzah, and Maror. Let's read together on the bottom of 53. According to the Mishnah, Rabbi Gamliel said, whoever does not consider well the meaning of these three things, Pesach, Matzah, and Maror, has not fulfilled the purpose of the Seder. So what is the meaning of this Pesach, of this shank bone? The what we call in English the Paschal lamb bone. Together on 55, in family groups, our people ate the Paschal lamb when the temple was still standing. For them the Pesach was a reminder that God passed over the houses of our ancestors in Egypt during the redemption. In our own day, too, we invoke God as the guardian of the household of Israel. As in our dwellings, we renew the family bond and strengthen our ties with the whole household of Israel. What is the meaning of the matzah? Together, of old, matzah was meant to recall that the dough prepared by our people had no time to rise before the final act of redemption. And they baked unleavened cakes of dough, since they had been driven out of Egypt, and could not delay, nor had they prepared provisions for themselves. And now we come to the maror. Here we are. Maror zeh she'anu ochlin al shum ma. What is the meaning of this maror? Page 56. Let me put down the maror. On the top of page 56, it was eaten, they said, because the Egyptians embittered the lives of our people, as it is written, with hard labor and mortar and brick, and in all sorts of work in the field, with all the tasks ruthlessly imposed upon them. Today as well, wherever slavery remains, Jews taste its bitterness. So we're going to turn to the Psalms on page 59. We're getting close to the second cup of wine and dinner. Let's read from the Psalms in the middle of page 59 in English. Hallelujah! Praise those servants of the Lord. Praise the name of God. God's name is praised in every place, from where the sun rises to where it sets. God is exalted above all nations. God's glory is beyond all the heavens. Who is like the one, our God, who sets her throne on high, but lowers God's gaze to heaven and earth, raising the poor from the dust, lifting the destitute from the squalor, seating him among nobility with the princes of his people, changing the barren woman to a joyful mother of children. So I remember Cantor Ephraim used to sing a special song here.
I did, and I'm looking for the second verse. I don't know if it's in
Beit Israel?
It is. Ellie, isn't it in your book here? Here it is. This is a Sephardi melody I picked up in Israel many years ago, and I haven't heard it for a long time. I do this over Passover. It's Beit Israel. Beit Israel mi Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov mela me'am lo'ez Hayeta Yehuda lekadsho Israel mamshelotav La 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 Hayam Rav Yanos Hayarden Isov Leachor Eharim Rakedu Kelim Kevaot Kibnetzon Beit Israel b'Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov me'am lo'ez Hayeta v'kodsho v'kadesh Israel mamshelotav.
Thank you, Cantor.
Forgot one of the words there, but you'll forgive me.
So we come to the second cup of wine. We're ready, almost ready for dinner. The great joy of technology is if you get tired of all the readings and such, you can always skip ahead, fast forward on your computer. We're in the middle, page 60. We will lift up the cup of wine and read together and then say the blessing. And then I invite all of you to enjoy a beautiful Passover dinner with one another. And in a few moments, after that long pause, we will sing some special Passover tunes and conclude our Seder. In the middle of page 60, this Kos Geula, the second cup of redemption. With this second cup of wine, we recall the second promise of liberation. I will deliver you from their bondage. In the middle of the page, remembering with gratitude the redemption of our ancestors from Egypt, rejoicing in the fruits of our struggle for freedom. We look now with hope to the celebration of a future redemption, the building of the city of peace, in which all will rejoice in the service of God, singing together a new song. We praise thee, O God, Redeemer of Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech